I still remember the day my peace shattered. After years of relentless saving and a clandestine search, I finally held the keys to my own sanctuary. My home. My sacred, secret space. I thought I'd outrun my family's relentless intrusion, especially my mother's suffocating love. But I was wrong. So painfully, naively wrong. One ordinary Wednesday, I walked through my front door to discover her, my mother, giving an unauthorized tour of my house, complete with critiques, renovation plans, and the casual spilling of my most private financial details to strangers. The violation was visceral, a cold shock that turned to burning rage. I'd spent a lifetime feeling like an extension of them, a piece of their collective narrative, never truly my own. This house was meant to be my declaration of independence. Instead, it became the battleground where I finally drew the line. This isn't just my story, it's a testament to what happens when love becomes control, when family is used as an excuse to ignore boundaries, and the radical act of choosing yourself. If you've ever felt trapped by the people who are supposed to cherish you most, if you've ever yearned for a space truly your own, then this is for you. Hit that like button if you face similar struggles, subscribe to join a community of boundary setters, and drop a comment below sharing your own experiences. Let's prove we are not alone in this fight for self-respect. The moment the key slid into the lock, a shiver of triumph ran through me, a potent cocktail of relief and disbelief. At 34, Keisha, a name that had always felt inextricably linked to Janet's daughter, finally owned a haven all her own. Years of meticulous budgeting, of penny pinching and strategic investments, lessons hard-learned as a financial analyst, had culminated in this singular, exhilarating achievement. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress, a symbol of independence, painstakingly built brick by metaphorical brick, far from the suffocating embrace of a family who saw personal space as a foreign, frankly rude, concept. The secrecy had been a heavy cloak, weighing on my shoulders with every whispered call to a realtor, every furtive lunch break spent with mortgage papers. But it was a necessary burden, a shield against the well-meaning, yet utterly destructive, tornado that was my mother, Janet. Growing up, the Collins household hadn't merely lacked privacy, it actively scorned it. My childhood bedroom door, conspicuously lockless, stood as a constant, gaping testament to the family credo: we are family, and family has nothing to hide. Janet, a veritable pioneer of helicopter parenting before the term even graced our lexicon, had perfected the art of benevolent surveillance. I still felt the hot flush of 13-year-old shame, the raw, searing humiliation, when I'd discovered her, my own mother, leafing through the pages of my flimsy, pink-locked diary. My sanctuary, my one tiny corner of unfiltered thought, had been ransacked. When I'd confronted her, a choke sob tearing from my throat, tears carving desperate tracks down my face, she'd looked genuinely bewildered by my distress. I need to know what's going on in your life, Keisha, she'd purred, her voice maddeningly placid. How else can I protect you? In that chilling moment, the core philosophy of our family crystallized: love and control, inextricably entwined, two sides of the same suffocating coin. My mother, armed with an FBI agent's tenacity, intercepted my mail, eavesdropped on my phone calls, and interrogated my friends with a smile that belied her relentless probing. My father, William, though physically present, remained a spectral figure, a silent partner in this domestic espionage, his inaction a quiet endorsement I could never penetrate. When my brother, Ethan, arrived 8 years after me, the dynamic shifted, albeit subtly. He became the undisputed golden child, showered with affection, yet subjected to the same invasive scrutiny. But Ethan, unlike me, seemed to bloom under the spotlight, perhaps because, as the sole boy and the baby of the family, his gilded cage came with extra privileges. "Your brother needs more support," became the default refrain whenever I dared to highlight the blatant disparity in our treatment. So, I learned to shrink, to want less, to expect even less. I became a master of concealment, tucking the truly important parts of myself deep inside, far beyond the reach of any prying eye or misplaced diary. College offered a tantalizing glimpse of freedom. 4 hours away, a state university campus promising anonymity and autonomy. Those first few months were intoxicating. I ate ice cream for breakfast, came and went as I pleased, and tasted a true, glorious solitude. But the euphoria was short-lived. By midterms, my mother had somehow charmed my resident advisor, Laura, into becoming her personal informant, a live feed into my comings and goings. Unannounced visits became a bi-monthly ritual, laden with homemade casseroles, industrial-strength cleaning supplies, and her meticulous reorganizing of my dorm room. My roommate, Zoe, poor thing, was invariably deemed a terrible influence due to the alleged chaos of her side of the room. After graduation, the gravitational pull of family obligation proved too strong. A coveted position in Chicago was met with such an onslaught of guilt-tripping and feigned maternal anxiety that I surrendered, accepting a financial analyst role in our hometown. Family stays together, my mother decreed, her voice dripping with the promise of future obligation. You'll thank me someday, when you have your own children and need help. The pattern continued, relentless and suffocating. My apartment, a mere 15 minutes away, was close enough to make declining Sunday dinners an act of treason, yet far enough to deter spontaneous, daily drop-ins. Then Ethan married Vanessa 5 years ago, and I watched, a knot of dread forming in my stomach, as she was inexorably drawn into the family vortex. Vanessa was everything I wasn't: outgoing, effervescent, a seemingly open book, and disarmingly comfortable with my mother's all-encompassing involvement. They became inseparable, shopping confidants, daily callers, my mother's counsel sought on everything from recipes to relationship woes. When Ethan and Vanessa bought their house, a mere 3 blocks from my parents', my mother was ecstatic. "Now we just need to find you a place in the neighborhood," she declared, her voice ringing with triumphant finality, regularly inundating me with listings for homes on their very street. Then we'd all be together, just as it should be. But I had a different vision. Years of living frugally, well below my means, and meticulously investing every spare penny, had given me an edge. As an analyst, I understood the silent, compounding power of disciplined saving. By 34, I had amassed a substantial down payment, enough to consider homes in neighborhoods far, far from my family's gravitational pull. 3 years prior, I had attempted a tentative push for independence, calling a family meeting to discuss a potential move to the east side of town, a mere 30-minute drive. It quickly devolved into an intervention, a united front of father, brother, and even Aunt Patricia, each delivering a litany of reasons why separation from the family would be catastrophic. "You've always been so sensitive, Keisha," my mother had wailed, tears glistening in her eyes, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "If you move so far away, who will check on you if you don't answer your phone? Who will bring you soup when you're sick?" Defeated, I had retreated, renewing my apartment lease, the bitter taste of surrender in my mouth. But something had fundamentally shifted within me. My independence, I realized, would never be freely granted, it would have to be seized. And so, with each passing month, my resolve hardened, mirroring the swelling balance in my savings account. The decision to keep my house hunt a profound secret wasn't made lightly. I had witnessed firsthand my mother's insidious infiltration into Ethan and Vanessa's home-buying journey. She'd bulldozed her way into every showing, offered unsolicited, damning opinions on everything from neighborhood safety to kitchen cabinet finishes, and even brazenly attempted to negotiate directly with the seller, much to the realtor's bewildered dismay. I still remembered Vanessa's face, the light in her eyes dimming, as she stood in what would become her living room, her excitement slowly dissolving under my mother's pronouncements about low ceilings and problematic south-facing windows. Vanessa, once so thrilled, had begun to echo my mother's concerns, her own preferences evaporating under the sheer weight of familial input. I couldn't bear the thought of my own nascent dream being similarly dismantled, dissected, and ultimately disfigured. So, when I finally felt financially ready, I constructed an elaborate charade. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I informed my family, were dedicated to a financial planning course. In reality, they were my clandestine rendezvous with realtors and properties. Lunch breaks became a flurry of hushed phone calls to mortgage brokers and home inspectors. I honed the art of deflection, expertly steering conversations away from any mention of future plans. My search began in the frigid depths of January, when the real estate market slumbered, a calculated risk. Fewer options, I reasoned, meant a reduced chance of an accidental sighting at an open house. I meticulously researched neighborhoods, seeking areas ripe for appreciation, yet strategically distanced from my family's usual haunts. The process was grueling, an unrelenting marathon of stress and second-guessing. Without my family's support, a euphemism for their pervasive interference, every decision, every monumental step, rested solely on my shoulders. Nights often found me staring at the ceiling, gnawing doubts echoing in the silence. Was this secrecy absurd? Was I overreacting to what my mother would inevitably label her loving concern? Then, like a stark, cold splash of water, Vanessa's deflated expression in her living room would flash through my mind, and my resolve would reignite, burning brighter than ever. After 27 houses, I found it. The one. A charming 1920s colonial, radiating warmth with its original hardwood floors, a bay window seemingly tailor-made for quiet afternoons with a book, and a small, perfectly imperfect garden in the back. It nestled on a tranquil street in Oakwood, a leafy, community-minded neighborhood a comfortable 35 minutes from my parents' home. The moment I stepped across its threshold, a profound, unfamiliar sense of peace washed over me, a feeling I'd rarely, if ever, experienced growing up. My realtor, Sophia, a woman in her 50s with a hearty laugh and no-nonsense demeanor, immediately picked up on it. Unlike the other realtors, she never pushed, never rushed. She simply understood, a silent ally in my quiet rebellion. "You love this one," she stated, her words a warm, knowing affirmation, not a question. "Is it that obvious?" I asked, a shy smile finally breaking through. "Keisha," she chuckled, "I've been showing you houses for 3 months. This is the first time you've looked like you're already living in one." The closing process was a high-wire act of nerve-shredding anxiety. I scheduled the signing for a Wednesday morning, feigning a doctor's appointment to my office and an important client meeting to my family. A new email address, solely for house-related correspondence, became my digital sanctuary, and all documents were rerouted to a rented post office box. I even splurged on a mobile notary, who met me in a bustling coffee shop, far from any prying eyes at the title company. Guilt, a familiar companion, gnawed at me constantly. Was I being ridiculous? Would my family truly be hurt by this milestone, accomplished without their all-encompassing presence? The doubt was a physical weight, nearly crippling at times. But each time my mother called, breathlessly detailing another perfect little house closer to them, I tightened my grip on my secret path, my resolve hardening. The day I received the keys was surreal, a hazy blur of elation and disbelief. Sophia, my steadfast ally, met me at the house, handing over not just the gleaming keys, but a bottle of celebratory champagne and a small, potted plant. "Every new house needs something living to welcome you home," she said, her quick hug a gesture of pure, unadulterated pride. "I am proud of you, Keisha. This is your space, on your terms." I stood in the echoing silence of the empty living room, keys clutched tightly in my hand, a profound realization dawning. I had done it. I owned a home. The walls around me were mine. For the very first time, I possessed a space that was truly, legitimately, legally, undeniably mine alone. Moving in was another intricate ballet of subterfuge. My old apartment remained my elaborate cover, slowly emptying its contents into my new domain through a series of inconspicuous, late-night transfers. Excuses for missed weekend gatherings flowed smoothly from my lips, masking hours spent painting, arranging, and slowly, meticulously, curating my new life. I became adept at video calls, carefully positioning my camera to reveal nothing but a bare wall, a meticulously chosen blank backdrop. Those initial weeks were a strange, exhilarating tightrope walk of a double life. At the apartment, everything remained meticulously as expected. At my house, I slowly, deliberately, crafted the home I had always yearned for. The living room walls bloomed in a soft sage green, a shade my mother would undoubtedly wrinkle her nose at in disdain. My books, once rigidly alphabetized under her watchful eye, now spilled across shelves, arranged by color, a vibrant, silent rebellion. Art that resonated deeply with my soul adorned the walls, refusing to merely match the furniture. Small acts of defiance, each one a whispered, yet potent, declaration of independence. My intention, of course, was to reveal my purchase eventually. This wasn't meant to be a lifelong secret, merely a temporary reprieve, just long enough to firmly establish this space as undeniably mine. I envisioned a grand unveiling, an intimate dinner once every detail was perfectly arranged, presenting them with my achievement as a fait accompli. In my more optimistic fantasies, I even pictured my mother, surprisingly, proud of my financial acumen, my father, impressed by my newfound independence. But life, I was learning, rarely adhered to my carefully constructed narratives, and families seldom followed the scripts I meticulously crafted in my mind. The day everything unraveled began unremarkably, a Wednesday in late April, spring tentatively asserting itself over the lingering bite of winter. I had been ensconced in my new home for nearly 6 weeks, still living my dual existence, still gathering the courage for the grand reveal. That morning, a crucial client meeting loomed at 2. I had prepared meticulously, rehearsing my presentation until the financial projections danced in my sleep. But at 11:30, my phone buzzed, illuminating my boss Marcus's name. Lofton meeting cancelled, the text read. Rescheduled for next Tuesday. Take the afternoon if you want, you've been putting in long hours. I stared at the message, momentarily disoriented by this unexpected gift of free time. Normally, this golden opportunity would have sent me directly to my house, eager to continue nesting. A bookshelf delivery was scheduled for the following week, and I needed to clear the space. A quick decision made, I packed my bag, informed my assistant Deidre I was out for the day, and headed home. My house. Not my apartment. The drive was glorious, spring sunshine warming the car, my mind buzzing with domestic fantasies. The antique mirror I'd found last weekend finally hung. Perhaps those kitchen cabinets, rearranged in a way that made logical sense, unlike the previous owner's haphazard system. Small, satisfying tasks, each one a quiet affirmation of ownership. As I turned onto my street, that familiar wave of peace washed over me, as it always did when I neared my sanctuary. It shattered instantly. In my driveway sat a silver Lexus SUV, unmistakably my mother's, and a blue Honda, clearly Vanessa's, beside them, a red compact I didn't recognize. My heart seized, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, as I slowly drove past my own home, my mind struggling to process the impossible sight. A mistake, surely. Perhaps they were visiting a neighbor. But no, the cars were defiantly in my driveway. As I circled the block, my thoughts a frenzied whirl, I glimpsed movement through my front window. Someone was inside my house. I parked around the corner, hands trembling so violently that my keys clattered to the pavement twice before I managed to lock the car. Approaching on foot, I moved with a cautious, almost primal stealth, creeping along the side of my property, the dense hydrangea bushes providing a welcome, albeit flimsy, cover. Voices drifted on the light breeze, a low murmur through the partially open dining room window. The crown molding is original to the house, my mother's voice, her full-blown tour guide persona activated, resonated clearly. Keisha has no idea how lucky she was to find a place with these architectural details intact. I crouched lower, inching closer, my breath catching in my throat. Through a sliver in the curtains, I saw my mother gesturing grandly around my dining room, Vanessa nodding with an almost sickening eagerness, while a woman I'd never seen before, a chic blonde, examined my built-in china cabinet with an appraising eye. "Has she decided on a color scheme yet?" the stranger asked, her voice light, airy. "This room would be stunning with a deep navy blue on the walls." "Olivia," my mother laughed, a sound that sent tendrils of ice crawling through my veins, "you know how indecisive she can be. That's why I wanted to show you the place. She needs guidance, and your eye for design would be such a help." They moved out of sight, their voices fading as they continued deeper into my kitchen. I remained frozen, a maelstrom of emotions swirling within me, making coherent thought impossible. How had they discovered my secret? How had they gained entry? And who was this Olivia that my mother felt entitled to share my private space with? I shifted, moving silently toward the kitchen window, where their voices grew louder, clearer. "The kitchen is nice, but so dated," Vanessa's voice, now tinged with a confident disdain, reached me. "Those cabinets would have to go immediately. And the countertops. I can't believe she settled for laminate." "Oh, we'll help her renovate," my mother assured her, her voice dripping with generous intent. "William and I were thinking of giving her some money for her birthday to update this space. It's just not functional for entertaining." I bit my lip, hard, the metallic tang of blood filling my mouth. Entertaining? This house was my sanctuary, not a communal venue for family gatherings. My kitchen, with its vintage charm, was perfectly functional for my needs. They moved again, the unmistakable creak of footsteps overhead indicating they had ascended to the second floor. I crept to the back of the house, seeking the broad, concealing embrace of a large oak tree, straining to catch their words through the partially open bathroom window. "The main bedroom gets wonderful morning light," my mother declared. "I'm thinking heavy drapes, though, in a nice burgundy, to add some sophistication." Then, Olivia's voice, casual, almost flippant, slicing through my composure. "How much did she pay for this place?" My most private financial transaction, a matter solely between me and the bank, now a topic of casual gossip. "Just under 300,000, my mother answered without a flicker of hesitation. "She had a good down payment saved, but I still think she overpaid. The market in this area isn't as desirable as the realtor led her to believe." I pressed my hand against my mouth, stifling a gasp that threatened to escape. Not only did my mother know the exact purchase price, but she was freely disseminating this deeply personal information to a complete stranger. The violation was physical, a punch to my gut, leaving me breathless. "Well," Vanessa chimed in, her voice brimming with proprietorial excitement, "the backyard is perfect for summer barbecues. I can already imagine using that patio space when the weather gets warmer. Ethan could set up his grill over there." "I was thinking the same thing," my mother agreed, her voice laced with approval. "And there's plenty of room for the kids to play when you and Ethan start your family." The audacious assumption that my newly acquired home would instantly become communal family property, a resource to be exploited, a space to be occupied and controlled, sent a tidal wave of fury surging through me. I gripped the rough bark of the oak tree, fighting to remain upright, the world tilting precariously. This was exactly what I had feared. Exactly why I had wrapped my purchase in such absolute secrecy. In their minds, my achievement wasn't mine at all. It was merely another extension of them, another asset to be absorbed into the family collective. I stood there, hidden, for what felt like an eternity, but was probably closer to an hour, listening to them tour every inch of my house. They dissected my taste, critiqued my sparse, carefully chosen furnishings, meticulously planned extensive renovations I neither desired nor could afford, and mapped out a full summer schedule of family gatherings in my backyard. A silent war raged within me, confrontation versus retreat. A visceral part of me yearned to burst through the front door, keys jangling like a vengeful spirit, and demand their immediate exodus. Yet, another, deeply ingrained part, conditioned by decades of ingrained family dynamics, whispered a chilling warning: a scene would only validate their narrative. I would be labeled emotional, irrational, desperately in need of their guidance. In the end, a third, colder option emerged. I would wait. Silently. Until they left. And then, I would ensure, with every fiber of my being, that this never, ever happened again. I remained concealed until I heard the distinct click of the front door opening, followed by a chorus of murmured goodbyes. Peering cautiously around the corner of the house, I watched, my blood running cold, as my mother, with a proprietary air, locked my front door with a key I had most certainly never given her. The three women chatted briefly by their cars, my mother patting Vanessa's shoulder with affectionate triumph, before they departed in separate vehicles, blissfully unaware of my presence, or the seismic storm they had unleashed. The moment their cars vanished from view, I sprinted to my front door, hands trembling with a volatile mix of rage and newfound determination. Inside, the cloying, lingering scent of my mother's distinctive floral perfume, a fragrance she'd worn unchanged since my childhood, hung in the air like an unwelcome spectre, a final, tangible insult. I stood in my entryway, surveying my violated space, noticing the small, insidious changes. A throw pillow subtly rearranged, a book shifted from its chosen spot, a candle moved to a different table. Each displacement was a fresh wound, a tiny assertion of their pervasive, unwelcome presence. My first call was to an emergency locksmith. The company promised someone within the hour, and true to their word, a young man named Diego arrived 45 minutes later. I paid the premium for same-day service without a moment's hesitation, watching with grim satisfaction, as he meticulously replaced every single lock in the house. Trouble with break-ins in the neighborhood? Diego asked conversationally, as he worked on the back door. Something like that, I replied, the words clipped, a lie that felt truer than the truth. The new locks were barely in place when my phone vibrated, my mother's name blazing on the screen. I let it ring, then ring again. On the third call, I finally answered, stepping out onto my back patio for a conversation I knew would be a brutal, necessary reckoning. Keisha. Her voice was a sharp blade of indignation. I just tried to stop by your house again to drop off some paint samples, and my key doesn't work. Did you change the locks? The casual, almost brazen admission that she had intended a second unauthorized visit, on the very same day, sent a fresh, powerful wave of fury through me. Yes, I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady, an almost superhuman effort. I changed the locks. Now, would you care to explain why you had a key to my house in the first place, or why you felt entitled to give a tour to Vanessa and someone I've never even met? A profound silence stretched between us, and I could almost see her face, the fleeting flicker of guilt quickly overshadowed by her reflexive, righteous defensiveness. I don't know why you're upset, she finally said, her voice laced with a theatrical bewilderment. I was just proud of your accomplishment, and wanted to show Vanessa and Olivia your beautiful home. Olivia is an interior designer, you know. She had wonderful ideas for your space. That's not the point, Mom. I retorted, my voice rising despite my desperate attempts to rein it in. You did not have permission to be in my house. You did not have permission to make a copy of my key. You did not have permission to share details about my private purchase with strangers. Olivia is hardly a stranger, my mother scoffed, her voice regaining its familiar, dismissive edge. She's Denise's daughter, you remember Denise from church. Besides, we are family, Keisha. Family doesn't need permission. That, I declared, my voice trembling with years of suppressed frustration, is exactly the problem. You have never respected my boundaries. Never. From reading my diary as a child to opening my mail as an adult opening your mail, she interrupted, a brittle, high-pitched quality to her voice that I instantly recognized from childhood, the sound of her caught in an undeniable lie. Yes, Mom. The closing documents for this house were mailed to me. That's how you found out, isn't it? You took my mail from my apartment while I was at work. The silence on the other end was deafening, a damning confirmation. Keisha, she finally spoke, her voice softening, morphing into the persuasive, manipulative tone that had always made me question my own perceptions. I was worried about you. You've been so secretive lately, missing family dinners, not answering calls promptly. I thought something might be wrong. When I saw the envelope from the title company, I was concerned you might be in some kind of financial trouble. So you opened it, I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, made a copy of my house key without my knowledge, and then felt entitled to enter my home and give tours while I was at work. My voice, despite my best efforts, was rising again, years of unvoiced grievances bubbling to the surface. You're blowing this out of proportion, she snapped, a defensive edge returning, sharp and cutting. I was going to tell you this weekend. I thought we could surprise you with some decorating help. Vanessa and I picked out curtains for the living room that would be much better than those flimsy things you have up now. I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers against my temple, where a throbbing headache was beginning to take root. Mom, what you did was wrong. It was a violation of my privacy and my trust. I am 34 years old, not a child. This is my home, purchased with my money. And you had no right, I had every right, she shrieked, her voice rising to match mine, spiraling into a familiar, theatrical indignation. I am your mother. Everything I have ever done has been for your benefit, to help you, to guide you. And this is the thanks I get. Locked out of my own daughter's house. Yes, I said, a strange, profound calm settling over me as I realized the futility of seeking acknowledgement, of expecting an apology. And you will remain locked out until you can respect my boundaries. I ended the call as her indignant protests began anew, then switched my phone off entirely, needing space, needing silence, to process the seismic shift that had just occurred. That precious solitude was fleeting. Just as I was making a soothing cup of tea, a thunderous pounding on my front door announced the arrival of my brother, Ethan. His face was flushed crimson with anger as I cautiously opened the door, the security chain still firmly in place. What the hell, Keisha, he demanded, no preamble, no greeting. Mom is at home crying because of you. Hello to you too, Ethan, I replied, making no move to remove the chain, to invite him in. I assume she called you immediately after our conversation. Of course she did. She's devastated. How could you accuse her of violating your privacy, when all she was trying to do was help you? I studied his face, a profound weariness settling over me. Did he genuinely not see the problem, or was familial loyalty simply eclipsing his capacity for objective thought? Did Mom tell you she made a copy of my house key without my permission, and brought Vanessa, and a stranger into my home while I was at work? A flicker of doubt, brief as a butterfly's wing, crossed his features, but it was instantly suppressed, replaced by a defensive scowl. She was excited for you. She wanted to help make your house a home. It already was my home, I said quietly, firmly. My home, Ethan. Mine. Not hers to redecorate. Not Vanessa's to plan barbecues in. And not a community space for the family to use at will. You've always been like this, he said, shaking his head, a dismissive, familiar gesture. So selfish. So wrapped up in your need for space. Family is supposed to be involved in each other's lives. That's what love is. No, Ethan, I corrected him, my voice gaining strength. That's what control is. Love would have been respecting my choice to buy a house on my own. Love would have been waiting for me to invite you into my space when I was ready. My brother's expression hardened, his jaw clenching. So that's it. You're just going to cut us all off because Mom was trying to help. I am setting boundaries, I clarified, the words feeling empowering, freeing. Something I should have done years ago. Boundaries, he repeated, a bitter, derisive laugh escaping him. That's just a fancy word for shutting out the people who care about you. You know what? Fine. Have your precious space. But don't come crying to us when you realize how lonely it is up on your high horse. He turned abruptly, stomping back to his car, leaving me standing in the doorway, physically trembling from the intensity of the confrontation. Within hours, the text messages began to pour in, a relentless barrage. Aunt Patricia expressed her profound disappointment in my cruel treatment of my mother. Cousin Ryan, ever the self-appointed therapist, suggested I needed therapy to address my paranoia about family involvement. Even my father, usually the stoic peacekeeper, sent a terse message, devoid of greeting, asking me to apologize to your mother for overreacting. The family narrative was solidifying, hardening around me, without my input, without my voice. Keisha was dramatic. Keisha was selfish. Keisha was rejecting family love. No one, it seemed, was willing to entertain the radical notion that perhaps, just perhaps, having a key made without permission, entering a home uninvited, and planning unsolicited renovations might, in fact, be the problematic behavior here. As the sun dipped below the horizon on that tumultuous day, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by walls I had painted in colors of my own choosing, clutching a mug of tea that had long grown cold. I felt raw, exposed, every nerve ending screaming, yet paradoxically, strangely liberated. For the very first time, I had stood my ground, unwavering, unyielding, refusing to capitulate to the relentless pressure of family expectations. The cost, I knew, was steep. My family relationships felt fractured, perhaps beyond repair. But as I gazed around the space that was truly mine, a quiet certainty settled within me. I had made the right choice. The locks were changed. The physical boundary was secured. Now came the harder part, maintaining the emotional boundaries against the tidal wave of familial manipulation I knew was just beginning. The days following the confrontation settled into an uncomfortable, icy new pattern. My mother, a grandmaster of the silent treatment when thwarted, didn't call again. My brother's messages grew increasingly terse, then ceased altogether. Family group texts, once a constant stream of updates on Sunday dinners and upcoming birthdays, conspicuously excluded me. It was as if a decree had been issued. Keisha was in exile, banished until she repented, until she fell back into line. A week after the lock change, I arrived home to find a large, elaborately wrapped gift basket perched on my porch. A peace offering, perhaps. The card, written in my mother's elegant script, read, "Thought these items might help warm up your house. Family always forgives. Sunday dinner at 5:30. Love, Mom." Inside the basket, the burgundy curtains she had so definitively chosen for my bedroom, a set of kitchen towels in a color I actively disliked, and several framed family photos, the very ones I had deliberately chosen not to display in my new, carefully curated space. The message was unmistakable, chillingly clear. My mother was willing to forgive my transgression, but only if I returned to the fold, only if I allowed her vision for my home to proceed unchallenged. That night, I drove the basket, unopened and untouched, back to my parents' porch, leaving a note of my own. "Thank you for thinking of me, but I have already selected decor that suits my taste. I will not be at Sunday dinner, as I am still processing the violation of my privacy. I hope in time you can understand why your actions were hurtful." 2 days later, my colleague, Alyssa, casually mentioned encountering my mother at the grocery store. "She seemed really worried about you," Alyssa reported, her brow furrowed with concern. "Said you'd been acting erratically, isolating yourself from family. She asked if you'd been behaving oddly at work, too." The campaign had escalated, expanding beyond the immediate family. My mother was now approaching my co-workers, painting me as unstable, subtly laying the groundwork to invalidate my decisions. It was a familiar tactic, one she had deployed with devastating effectiveness during my college years, when I had first dared to assert my nascent independence. As May bled into June, the attempts at manipulation grew more varied, more insidious. Aunt Patricia called, her voice heavy with portent, to inform me that my mother had been to the doctor with concerning symptoms, heavily implying that my coldness was directly impacting her health. My cousin Emily reached out, suggesting a family therapy session to work through this difficult time, a suggestion that might have held merit had it not been delivered with the implicit, infuriating assumption that I was the one who needed fixing. Meanwhile, I took concrete, proactive steps to fortify my new boundaries. I hired a security company to install cameras at my front and back doors, added motion-sensing lights, and set up a video doorbell system. These measures felt extreme, like something lifted from a psychological thriller rather than necessary precautions against one's own family. But the profound peace of mind they afforded was worth every single penny. When Thanksgiving loomed, the pressure intensified to an almost unbearable degree. Family holidays in our household were sacrosanct, attendance mandatory, barring hospitalization or out-of-state travel. My father, breaking his months-long silence, called directly. "Your mother has set a place for you," he stated, devoid of greeting, his voice gruff with disapproval. "Dinner is at 3. Vanessa is making her sweet potato casserole." The sheer audacity of the assumption that I would simply appear, that months of profound conflict could be swept aside for the sake of maintaining holiday traditions, was so utterly typical that a bitter laugh almost escaped me. "I will not be there, Dad," I said quietly, my voice firm. "I have made other plans." In truth, my other plans involved a quiet day at home and dinner with my friend Sophia, who had invited me after hearing about my family situation, but I owed him no explanation. "This has gone on long enough, Keisha," my father declared, his voice adopting the stern, authoritarian tone that had quelled countless arguments throughout my childhood. "You have made your point. Your mother feels terrible about the misunderstanding." "There was no misunderstanding, Dad," I interrupted, unable to let the egregious characterization stand. "Mom made a copy of my key without permission and entered my home without consent. That is not a misunderstanding. That is a violation." "She is your mother," he countered, as if the sacred bond of motherhood granted immunity from basic respect for boundaries. "Yes, she is," I conceded, my voice softening, yet retaining an unwavering core of steel. "And I love her. But I cannot continue in a relationship where my autonomy is not respected." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with decades of unspoken family dynamics, of suppressed emotions and unaddressed grievances. Finally, my father sighed, a sound of profound resignation. "I don't recognize you anymore, Keisha. The daughter we raised would never turn her back on family." The accusation stung, a sharp, familiar jab, but beneath the pain, a profound realization bloomed: perhaps they truly didn't recognize me anymore. Because for the first time, I was refusing to be the daughter they had raised, a daughter who habitually subordinated her own needs to maintain a fragile, artificial peace. "I am not turning my back on family, Dad," I asserted, my voice clear and strong. "I am asking for respect. When you and Mom are ready to discuss what happened without dismissing my feelings, I will be here." Christmas brought a new, more elaborate tactic. A veritable tower of brightly wrapped packages appeared on my porch, accompanied by cards heavy with emotional appeals. "Christmas without you is not Christmas at all," my mother's elegant script pleaded. "Please don't punish the whole family because of one mistake." One mistake. The words grated, minimizing months of insidious boundary violations into a single, easily forgivable error. It was gaslighting, artfully wrapped in festive paper, and tied with a bow of guilt instead of ribbon. I left the gifts untouched, a silent, weighty monument in my spare room, unable to either accept or return them without feeling manipulated. They sat there, a physical manifestation of the emotional burden I carried, a constant, visual reminder of the immense cost of standing my ground. Throughout this tumultuous period, I found myself desperately needing external support to maintain my resolve against such concentrated familial pressure. On the recommendation of a colleague, I began seeing Dr. Harriet Knox, a therapist specializing in family dynamics. In her comfortable office, with its soothing blue walls and meticulously tended plants, I slowly, cautiously, began to unravel the deeply entrenched patterns that had defined my family relationships for decades. What you are experiencing, Dr. Knox explained gently during one session, her voice calm and reassuring, is a predictable response to boundary setting with people who have never had to respect boundaries before. The guilt. The flying monkeys approaching you on your mother's behalf. The feigned health concerns. The minimization of the violation. These are all common tactics designed to pull you back into the established dynamic. Sometimes I wonder if I'm overreacting, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. Was changing the locks really necessary? Dr. Knox leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing, yet kind. Keisha, if a friend told you someone had made a copy of their house key without permission and entered their home while they were away, what would you advise them to do? The answer, laid out so simply, was glaringly obvious. Change the locks. Exactly, she affirmed. The fact that the person who violated your boundaries is your mother does not make the violation any less serious. In fact, one could argue, it makes it more serious, as it represents a profound betrayal of the trust that should exist between parent and child. These sessions became my lifeline, a safe harbor, as I navigated the unfamiliar, treacherous territory of being the family scapegoat. Dr. Knox helped me recognize that my pain was valid, that my deep-seated desire for privacy and autonomy was not only healthy but essential, and that the profound discomfort of maintaining boundaries was temporary, while the freedom gained was utterly permanent. Outside of therapy, I began, slowly, hesitantly, to construct a new support system, a carefully chosen network of friends who respected my boundaries without question. Sophia, my astute realtor, transcended her professional role, becoming a close friend, always ready with practical advice, or simply a sympathetic, understanding ear. My co-worker Damon invited me to join his friends for weekly game nights, providing a much-needed social connection devoid of the emotional landmines that characterized family gatherings. My next-door neighbor, Grace, a retired teacher with a no-nonsense attitude and a magical green thumb, offered both companionship and invaluable guidance, as I tentatively learned to nurture my small, beloved backyard. These relationships, freely chosen and mutually respectful, stood in stark, refreshing contrast to the obligation-laden connections that defined my family. For perhaps the first time in my life, I experienced what it truly felt like to be valued for who I was, rather than how perfectly I conformed to others' expectations. The hardest part of this period, perhaps, was the quiet, profound mourning of the family relationship I had always wished for, rather than the stark, often painful reality of the one I actually had. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, grieving the mother who could have been genuinely happy for my accomplishment, rather than seeing it solely as an opportunity to reassert her suffocating control. I mourned the father who might have, just once, stood up for my fundamental right to independence, the brother who could have understood my perspective instead of reflexively aligning against me. But through the tears, the crushing guilt, and the relentless days of doubt, I clung fiercely to one undeniable, immutable truth: this house was mine. The space I had meticulously created within these walls was a direct reflection of my own tastes, my own choices, my own burgeoning self. And that self, I realized with a fierce protectiveness, was utterly worth safeguarding, even at such an immense, heartbreaking cost. 6 months after the lock-changing incident, on a crisp, golden October afternoon, a quiet knock at my door startled me. I opened it cautiously to find my brother, Ethan, standing alone on my porch. No Vanessa, no parents, just Ethan, his hands thrust deep into his jacket pockets, an unreadable expression etched across his face. "Can we talk?" he asked, shifting uncomfortably from one foot to the other. I hesitated, my gaze searching his face for any telltale signs of a family-appointed mission to lure me back into the fold. Finding none, only a profound weariness, I stepped back, gesturing him inside. Ethan stood awkwardly in my living room, his eyes slowly taking in the transformations I had wrought over the past months. The bookshelf I had painstakingly built myself, the gallery wall of art I had carefully collected, the comfortable, lived-in furniture arranged to suit my habits, not some arbitrary design rule. "Your place looks nice," he said finally, his voice a little strained. "Different from what I imagined, but nice." "Thank you," I replied, still wary, my guard still up. "Can I get you something to drink?" He accepted a glass of water, and we settled onto opposite ends of my sofa, the physical distance between us mirroring a chasm far deeper. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said, after a long, heavy silence, his gaze fixed on his water glass, as if finding profound answers in its shimmering surface. "I should have understood what you were saying about boundaries. I get it now, and I'm sorry it took me so long." The words were so utterly unexpected, so profoundly out of character, that for a moment, I could only stare at him, my mind reeling. "What changed?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan sighed heavily, placing his glass carefully on a coaster. "Vanessa and I have been having problems." "Nothing serious," he added quickly, catching my expression, "but enough to make us step back and look at some patterns in our marriage." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts, his gaze meeting mine, suddenly raw and vulnerable. "Last month, Vanessa realized some of her personal things had been moved in our bedroom. Her journal. Some papers from her work. At first, we thought maybe one of us had moved them and forgotten. Or maybe the cleaning service had shifted things while dusting." A cold, sickening feeling settled in the pit of my stomach, already anticipating the grim destination of this story. Then Vanessa noticed comments Mom was making, specific things she couldn't have known unless. He trailed off, then met my eyes directly, a stark honesty in his gaze. "Unless she had been reading Vanessa's journal. Just like she used to read yours." The validation. His words, a searing confirmation that I hadn't imagined, hadn't exaggerated, my mother's decades-long pattern of boundary violations, hit me with an unexpected, almost physical force. For years, I had been systematically gaslighted, made to feel that my fundamental desire for privacy was the problem, that my sensitivity was the root cause of all conflict. Now, here was undeniable proof that the pattern existed, stark and objective, beyond my own often questioned perception. When Vanessa confronted her, Ethan continued, his voice heavy with a new understanding, "Mom gave the same excuses she probably gave you. That she was worried. That she needed to know what was happening in her daughter-in-law's life to better support her. That family doesn't keep secrets." I nodded, the chilling familiarity of the justifications a bitter taste in my mouth. "Vanessa was furious," he finished, running a hand through his hair, looking utterly spent. "She told me either the locks got changed, or she was staying with her sister for a while." Ethan looked up, his eyes meeting mine, a newfound clarity shining through the lingering exhaustion. "That's when it hit me. If I was immediately ready to change the locks to protect my wife's privacy, why had I attacked you for doing exactly the same thing to protect your own?" The question hung between us, an honest, raw acknowledgement of the profound double standard that had been so cruelly, so unfairly, applied to my life. "Because I was always supposed to accept Mom's behavior," I said softly, the words a quiet summation of a lifetime of conditioning. "I was raised to see her intrusions as love." Ethan nodded slowly, a somber understanding dawning in his eyes. "And I was raised to see you as overreacting whenever you pushed back. I'm sorry, Keisha. I should have been a better brother." We talked for hours that afternoon, truly talked, in a way we never had before. Ethan, the golden child, recounted his own experiences growing up, the subtle yet persistent pressures that came with his privileged position. I explained the profound isolation I had felt from the family over the past months, and how, ironically, that painful space had brought a clarity I had never known. Together, we meticulously unpacked the intricate, often toxic, dynamics that had shaped our childhoods and continued to exert a powerful, often detrimental, influence on our adult relationships. "I'm not cutting Mom and Dad out of my life," Ethan clarified as our conversation gently wound down. "And I'm not asking you to reconcile if you're not ready. I just wanted you to know that I understand now, and I support your right to set boundaries, even if they are different from mine." His support, utterly unexpected and completely undemanded, felt like the first solid brick laid in a new foundation between us. Not a complete reconstruction of our fractured sibling relationship, perhaps, but a hesitant, hopeful beginning, built on mutual respect rather than the brittle demands of family obligation. 2 weeks after Ethan's visit, fortified by my newfound strength and Dr. Knox's guidance, I agreed to meet my parents at a carefully chosen, neutral location, a bustling coffee shop downtown. At my insistence, we were joined by a family mediator, Layla, a calm, professional woman specializing in adult family conflicts. My parents were visibly uncomfortable, fidgeting in their seats, clutching their lattes, as if they might offer some tangible defense against the impending conversation. But they had agreed to my terms, a small yet profoundly significant concession. "I want to start by thanking all of you for agreeing to this meeting," Layla began gently, her voice a soothing balm. "Keisha has explained some of the concerns that led to the current distance in your relationship. Today is an opportunity to listen to each other and perhaps find a path forward." My mother sat rigidly, her back straight, her grip tight on her mug, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line that could have signified either simmering anger or a desperate effort to contain her volatile emotions. My father, though clearly uncomfortable, held a quiet, resolute gaze, his eyes flicking between me and the mediator. "Keisha, would you like to share what you hope to gain from today's meeting?" Layla prompted, her voice encouraging. I had rehearsed this moment countless times with Dr. Knox, meticulously crafting words that were firm but not accusatory, clear but not cruel. "I love you both," I began, meeting their eyes directly, my voice steady. "And I miss having you in my life. But for us to rebuild our relationship, I need acknowledgement that entering my home without permission was wrong, and I need clear commitments regarding boundaries going forward." My mother's posture stiffened further, her eyes flashing, but before she could launch into her familiar defensive tirade, my father did something utterly unexpected, something that made my breath catch in my throat. He reached across the table, gently placing his hand over hers. "We should listen first, Janet," he said quietly, his voice carrying an uncharacteristic firmness. Then, turning his gaze to me, a silent invitation in his eyes, he added, "Go on, Keisha. We are listening." The simple, profound act of being encouraged to speak, without immediate defense or dismissal, was so astonishing, so utterly foreign, that for a fleeting moment, my carefully prepared words vanished. Recovering, I systematically outlined the specific, non-negotiable boundaries I needed: no unscheduled visits, no sharing of my personal information with extended family or friends, unwavering respect for my decisions about my home and my life, even if they vehemently disagreed. When I finished, a long, pregnant silence descended upon the table. My mother's eyes glistened, unshed tears hovering on the brink, her lips still pressed into that thin, taut line. "Janet, William," Layla asked gently, "would either of you like to respond to what Keisha has shared?" My mother began to speak, her voice tight, constrained, filled with a familiar, controlled emotion. "I never meant to hurt you, Keisha. Everything I have ever done has been out of love and concern for your well-being." It was the precise, well-worn opening to her standard defense, the preamble to her self-justification. But then, something truly astonishing happened. My father spoke up again, his voice imbued with a quiet, undeniable authority I had rarely heard him use with my mother. "Janet," he said gently, but firmly, "I think what Keisha needs is not an explanation of your intentions, but an acknowledgement of the impact of your actions." My mother turned to him, clearly blindsided by this unprecedented departure from his usual passive, peacekeeper role. Their eyes met, locking in a silent, intense exchange that seemed to contain an entire private conversation, a lifetime of unspoken dynamics. Then, my mother sighed deeply, a long, shuddering exhalation of surrender. "You are right," she said, first to my father, then turning her gaze, heavy with a mixture of resentment and resignation, to me. "You are right, Keisha. I should not have entered your home without permission. I should not have made a copy of your key. I was wrong to do that, regardless of my intentions." The words. The actual, unequivocal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, devoid of qualifiers or evasive redirection, the words I had waited months, decades, to hear, almost didn't register at first. I felt something tight in my chest, a hard, painful knot of resentment I had carried for so long, begin to subtly, tentatively, loosen. I had almost forgotten it was there. "Thank you," I said simply, the two words imbued with more meaning than any grand speech could convey. "That means a lot to me." The remainder of the meeting was not easy. Old, deeply ingrained patterns reasserted themselves, my mother occasionally slipping into familiar defensiveness, my father sometimes attempting to smooth over difficulties rather than addressing them head-on. But with Layla's gentle, yet firm, guidance, we managed to stay focused on the core issues, even reaching some preliminary agreements on how our relationship might tentatively function going forward. By the end of the 2-hour session, we had drafted a basic framework, a fragile blueprint for rebuilding trust. My mother agreed to text before visiting and wait for an affirmative response. My father committed to respecting my decisions about my home and my life, without attempting to change my mind. And I, in turn, promised to make genuine efforts to maintain connection, through regular phone calls and occasional shared meals, while being steadfastly honest about my needs and my limits. It was a beginning. Imperfect, fragile, but undeniably real. As we prepared to leave, my father did something he had not done since I was a small child. He hugged me. A proper, enveloping embrace, rather than the perfunctory, awkward gesture that had become our norm. "I'm proud of you," he whispered, his voice gruff, husky with emotion. "For standing up for yourself. For this beautiful home you've created. For becoming the strong woman you are." Those words, so long desired, so utterly unexpected, brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes. Not everything was resolved. Not all wounds were instantly healed. But a door that had seemed irrevocably sealed shut had opened just enough, allowing a tentative, fragile ray of hope to filter through. The arduous process of rebuilding trust was excruciatingly slow, and not without its disheartening setbacks. My mother, ever resistant to introspection, attended 3 therapy sessions with me and Dr. Knox before unilaterally declaring it unnecessary. Yet, even those few sessions, under Dr. Knox's expert guidance, established a shared vocabulary for discussing boundaries, a crucial tool that helped us navigate the inevitable difficult moments that arose. My father, surprisingly, continued to meet with me and the therapist occasionally, seemingly genuinely eager to understand the complex dynamics that had shaped our family. 2 months after our mediated meeting, I extended an invitation to my parents, dinner at my house. The invitation came with clear, non-negotiable parameters: arrival at 6, departure by 9. No discussions of renovation or decoration, unless I specifically solicited their input. To my immense relief, they respected these boundaries completely, admiring my home as it was, rather than as they would have created it. As winter grudgingly gave way to spring, a tentative new normal began to emerge. My relationship with my brother, Ethan, grew stronger, painstakingly rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect rather than the brittle demands of shared family obligation. Vanessa and I, unexpectedly, developed a fragile friendship, independent of our familial connection, finding common ground in our shared experiences and interests, rather than merely tolerating each other out of a sense of duty. The first truly successful family gathering at my house occurred in April, precisely 1 year after the infamous lock-changing incident. A small, intimate birthday dinner for my father, with clear beginning and end times, specific invitations rather than assumed attendance, and most importantly, a genuine enjoyment of each other's company, untainted by the insidious undercurrents of control and resentment that had previously defined our interactions. As my mother prepared to leave that evening, she paused in the entryway, her gaze sweeping across the home I had so carefully, so fiercely, created. "You know," she said thoughtfully, a rare flicker of genuine contemplation in her eyes, "I never would have chosen that color for your living room walls. But seeing it now, with everything else you've done, I have to admit, it suits you perfectly." Coming from my mother, this quiet, understated acknowledgement that my choices could be valid, even when diametrically opposed to hers, felt monumental. A small, yet profoundly significant step toward her seeing me as a separate, autonomous person, rather than merely an extension of herself. "Thank you, Mom," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "That means a lot." 1 year after changing my locks, I sat in my garden on a perfect, balmy spring evening, reflecting on the arduous, transformative journey of the past 12 months. The small patio, where my mother had once so brazenly planned family barbecues without my input, was now my cherished sanctuary, my favorite spot for morning coffee and quiet evening reflection. I had planted lavender and rosemary along its borders, their delicate scents filling the air with each gentle breeze, a testament to growth and peace. The path to healing, I knew, had not been straight or simple. There had been moments of regression, my mother occasionally forgetting to call before stopping by, my own occasional retreats into defensive silence rather than clear communication. But underneath the inevitable missteps, a solid foundation of respect, one that had never existed in our relationship before, was slowly, painstakingly, being built. Ironically, establishing firm, unyielding boundaries had, in the end, profoundly improved our family relationships, rather than destroying them, as I had so desperately feared in my darkest moments. With clear expectations and defined consequences, our interactions became less fraught with unspoken tensions and simmering resentments. I no longer dreaded family gatherings, no longer braced myself for inevitable boundary violations at every turn. My mother, in turn, gradually shed her compulsive need to constantly monitor my life, slowly, reluctantly accepting that my independence was not, in fact, a rejection of her, but an assertion of myself. The change, I knew, had not come easily for her. At Dr. Knox's subtle suggestion, my mother had eventually, grudgingly, begun seeing her own therapist, though she steadfastly refused to share details of those sessions with the family. Whatever was discussed, however, seemed to yield results, as over time, I noticed subtle but undeniably significant shifts in her behavior. She began to ask, rather than assume, to listen, rather than immediately offer unsolicited solutions, to recognize when her help was, in fact, anything but helpful. My father, too, had transformed in ways I had never anticipated. Once I broke the ingrained pattern of expecting him to mediate my conflicts with my mother, he gradually, tentatively, found his own voice in family discussions. Our relationship, long defined primarily through the filter of my mother, developed its own direct channel of communication. We discovered shared interests in history and architecture, passions that had lain dormant, utterly unexplored during my childhood. Perhaps the most astonishing transformation of all was in my relationship with Ethan. The rigidly defined roles of golden child and scapegoat, assigned to us by family dynamics utterly beyond our control, gradually dissolved, giving way to simply being brother and sister, with all the inherent complexities and messy, beautiful realities that entailed. We disagreed sometimes, fiercely, but we supported each other often, with an unexpected, profound loyalty, building a bond based on mutual respect rather than the brittle framework of shared family mythology. Even Vanessa, whose initial, unwitting intrusion into my home had been such a catalyst for the original violation, had, in her own way, made amends. 6 months after the incident, she had invited me to lunch, just the two of us. "I owe you an apology," she had said, the moment we were seated, her gaze earnest and direct. "I should never have gone into your house without your permission, and I should have recognized how wrong it was when Janet suggested it." Her directness was disarmingly refreshing, her accountability unqualified by excuses or elaborate explanations. "At the time, I genuinely didn't see the problem," she had continued, her voice soft with self-reflection. "In my family, everyone is in and out of each other's homes constantly. But that doesn't mean I get to impose that dynamic on you. Your boundaries are valid, and I am truly sorry I violated them." That lunch marked the beginning of a genuine relationship between us, one that was chosen, rather than simply obligatory. We discovered shared interests in books and hiking, common ground that had never emerged during the stifling confines of family gatherings. While we would never be best friends, we developed a genuine appreciation for each other, independent of our shared family connection. My house, once the unwitting focal point of intense family conflict, gradually, gracefully, became a true sanctuary. Not an isolation chamber, cutting me off from meaningful relationships, as my family had initially, dramatically, feared. But a sacred space where I could engage with others authentically, genuinely, precisely because I felt utterly secure in my boundaries. The security cameras remained, a practical precaution rather than a symbol of distrust. The spare key was entrusted only to my steadfast friend Sophia, with the clear, unambiguous understanding that it was for emergencies only. These measures, which had once felt extreme, even paranoid, now seemed like simple prudence, the adult equivalent of locking a bathroom door. Beyond my immediate family relationships, the profound experience of setting and maintaining boundaries had subtle, yet powerful ripple effects throughout my entire life. At work, I became more confident, more comfortable declining projects that didn't align with my strengths or interests, learning to advocate for my own professional well-being. In friendships, I learned to express my needs directly, openly, rather than habitually accommodating others at my own expense. In dating, I recognized red flags far more quickly, no longer mistaking suffocating control for genuine care, or relentless persistence for true passion. Dr. Knox had been utterly right. The discomfort of establishing boundaries was undeniably temporary, but the profound freedom gained was absolutely, beautifully permanent. The corrosive guilt that had plagued me during those early, estranged months gradually dissolved, replaced by a quiet, unwavering confidence in my inherent right to determine the conditions of my own relationships. There were still difficult moments, of course. Family patterns, deeply ingrained over decades, did not magically disappear entirely in a single year. My mother occasionally, inevitably, slipped back into her old, controlling behaviors, especially during times of heightened stress or significant change. But the crucial difference now was that these slips were recognized and addressed, swiftly and firmly. Not accepted as inevitable, not endured in silent, simmering resentment. The locks I had changed in that moment of righteous, visceral anger had come to represent something far deeper than mere physical security. They symbolized my profound ownership, not just of my property, but of my entire life. My undeniable right to determine who had access to my space, my precious time, my vital energy. In changing those locks, I had, with a quiet strength, declared myself the ultimate authority on my own needs and my own boundaries. A declaration that continued to echo, gently yet powerfully, through all my relationships. As twilight deepened in my garden on that anniversary evening, painting the sky in soft hues of lavender and grey, I thought about the younger woman I had been a year before. Terrified of family rejection, yet finally, courageously, willing to risk it all for the sake of her own autonomy. I wished I could reach back through time, to tell her that the journey ahead, though undeniably difficult, would ultimately lead to relationships deeper, more authentic, more profoundly meaningful than she had ever dared to imagine. That in standing firm, in holding her ground, she would discover inner strengths she had never known she possessed. That the family she so desperately feared losing would, eventually, painfully but beautifully, transform into something healthier, precisely because she had been brave enough to demand fundamental change. The house keys in my pocket felt different now. Familiar, reassuring, rather than fraught with layers of painful significance. Just keys. Not symbols of rebellion or independence. Just the humble means to secure a space that was undeniably, wonderfully, mine. A space where I could, at last, welcome others, on my own terms. Have you ever had to set profoundly difficult boundaries with people you love? It is never, ever easy, but sometimes, it is the most vital, most necessary act for real, healthy relationships to truly flourish. If this story resonated deeply with you, please leave a comment below, sharing your own powerful experience. And if you found value, strength, or a glimmer of hope in hearing my journey, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share this video with someone who might desperately need to hear that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is, in its purest form, an act of radical self-respect that ultimately, profoundly, benefits everyone involved. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes, the most crucial locks we need to change are not just on our doors, but on the deeply ingrained patterns that no longer, ever, serve us.